Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm talking about big versus small clients. Stay tuned to hear some of my own client experiences. You know, I always have some good client stories, and to find out some things that may just surprise you. Now, I decided to talk about this topic of big versus small clients because I always hear a lot of designers saying, I just need a couple big clients to make what I want per month, right? Or if only I could work with such and such, you know, insert any big company name here, right? And hey, I used to think the same way earlier on in my career. Now, having worked with mostly smaller nonprofits, but also some large organizations as well, I can tell you there are definitely pros and cons to working with big and small clients. So I'm going to get into some of them, and some of these might surprise you. Now, keep in mind, these are generalizations from my own experience, but there are exceptions to everything. Okay, so let's dive into the pros of working with big clients. Okay, and the first pro of working with a big client is, of course, prestige. You know, if you can tell a prospective client or show on your website a testimonial or the logo of a big name company, it instantly impresses them. It also builds trust with them. They will think, oh, well, if a company as big as Target, you know, worked with this designer, they must be really great. They might also think it's cool for them to work with you, like for their own bragging rights. Oh, we worked with a designer who worked for Disney, you know? So prestige and trust come from working with well-known companies, and that can help you not only attract more clients, but more of the same types of clients. Okay, another advantage to working with larger businesses is that they may be more organized because they might have several departments with certain people responsible for handling different things, and your main point of contact isn't tasked with a million different duties. They might be more organized and focused. Now, the next one, of course, is budgets. Larger clients usually have larger budgets to work with, right? They might also expect to pay more than a smaller organization would. Now, like I said, there are some cons to working with big clients. And the first one is red tape. The fact that larger clients may be more structured and have several departments also means more red tape to get through. Your main contact is likely not the decision maker who's going to approve your estimate or the work. There might be multiple people from different departments who might need to approve the content, the design, review edits, and so forth, right? And that just makes it harder for you to communicate because this goes beyond your main point of contact. You know, there are people that you don't usually have access to present your design to. So your main contact, not you, is the one going back and explaining your design, and they may not do that at all, or they may not share what you told them about the design, right? So that could actually make it harder to get the design approved. Now, larger clients may also have higher expectations than smaller clients. Okay, not always, but sometimes. So because there might be quite a few people from different departments that are reviewing and approving things, they might request a lot of revisions. Okay, but the other thing is that they might treat you like a peon, right? And I've got a story for this actually. Okay, so I will never forget how this woman that I spoke with from a large and very well-known organization spoke to me. She had been referred by a colleague that I had just worked with within that same organization, and it had been one of the biggest, maybe the biggest nightmare jobs of my entire career. Okay, so she scheduled a call with me. We got on the call, and I just started asking questions about the project so that I could understand more about it and give her an estimate, right? Well, in the middle of this conversation, she interrupted me and she asked in a pretty snotty tone, "Who's interviewing who here?" Now, to say that I was shocked would be an understatement. I tried to explain to her that I needed to find out about the project in order to give her an estimate. I mean, then she proceeded to tell me that I should be grateful at the opportunity to do work for their organization. Okay, so now I wasn't just shocked. I was actually disgusted. So I told her that we would not be a good fit, and I hung up. Okay, so, you know, there's that you might have to contend with certain companies. Now, another thing is payments. Okay, they might dictate your contractual terms about payments including how long it's going to take for them to pay you and when they're going to pay you, right? So it could take longer to get paid. Another thing is control. Larger clients also usually means you have less control. So for instance, they might require that you sign their contract instead of using yours. And that might entail now you have to go get a lawyer to review the contract because they have all these different things in there that yours doesn't include, and maybe you don't know what they mean. Not only that, but a lot of times they will come to you like already knowing what they think needs to be done. So they're not so much looking for your input, right? They're just looking for you to be the doer, the order taker. The other thing is that managing the project could be much more difficult. And that's because you don't have access to other people on their end, or they might have certain processes in place, and those processes deviate from your processes. Now, in one particular case with a large and well-known organization, the main point of this is actually the same nightmare job. Though this is the person that referred the other bad person. Okay, my main point of contact was actually switched out no fewer than 6 times, I'd say. I mean, I kid you not. Okay, the project was a huge nightmare, like I said. I had to explain things all over again to every single new contact. I was so done with this job, okay? And a project that was supposed to be pending approval, was then like getting new edits from this new contact. It was like never ending. It was horrible. And then I was repeatedly asked to provide estimates for other projects that were part of this one large project. I mean, sounds great, right? There's more work, right? But here's what happened. They nitpicked over so many details that it was like I spent just as much time estimating as working on the projects. And as if that wasn't bad enough, at one point they asked me to cancel one of the smaller projects. At this point, the project became so difficult for me to manage that at first I was just like, okay. And then later I realized, oh my God, I forgot that we had already finished that project. So, oh my God, like just thinking about it all over again stresses me out. It was just so awful. Now, on the flip side, because you work with a larger company, you may actually have to give up some of your control. So for example, you might allow them to get away with breaking your rules because they're a big company and you have stars in your eyes, or you might feel intimidated by them, right? I've been there. Okay, so now let's get into the advantages of working with small clients. Now, the first one might surprise you, and that is budget. Sometimes small clients actually have bigger budgets than you might think. A lot of times what happens is that a nonprofit will get funding from like a federal grant, right? And they have to use the full amount of the project. Now, sometimes those grants can be small, but a lot of times they're actually a pretty decent budget. Now, again, on the flip side, there are plenty of large clients that are unwilling to pay much at all for quality work, or who dictate how much they're willing to pay. Another pro to working with smaller clients is that you have much more control over everything, right? So project management, the design, and the billing. There are way fewer cooks in the kitchen, but you also don't usually need to deviate from your process and how you manage the project and your payment terms, which is great. Another pro is inspiration, right? You might actually get joy or be inspired from helping smaller clients to succeed. And there might be nonprofits out there that you want to help because you support their mission and you feel good about helping them. Another advantage is the amount of work. They might actually have fewer staff members, so they rely on you for more projects, right? Not just one, but maybe long term. I've had that a lot throughout my career. Another advantage is the personal relationship. When you have a smaller client, there are way fewer people involved, and a lot of the times you might work one-on-one with your point of contact over and over again. Okay, this also makes it easier to get to know that person, and they get to know you, and that can also make the work more enjoyable. I mean, I have some great relationships with so many people from both small and large organizations, despite my previous stories. And you know what? You're also able to provide a more personalized service, and then you get to know their business better, right? And so when that happens, then you can help them more. So that's really good for them too. Now, another pro is that they might show you more respect. Not always, but sometimes. I've got plenty of stories from both sides of the fence on that, right? But smaller clients may be more likely to see you as the trusted expert, especially when they don't have anyone doing design in-house, for instance, right? So you're the only designer that they're working with, maybe. They might also be more willing to listen to you, like if you have any recommendations and things like that that might actually help them. Okay, now some of the disadvantages of working with smaller clients is, well, they may not have a large budget, or they might actually be more price driven than quality driven. And then also the amount of work. They might not have a lot of work for you. I mean, they could go either way. They could have a ton of work for you and they just want to work with you and have you handle all of their design needs, right? Or they could have just some one-off projects, and so they don't have a lot of recurring and ongoing projects for you to do. So there's that too. So now you might be asking yourself, should I work with small or large clients? Well, you definitely don't have to choose one or the other. You can certainly have a mix of small and large clients in your client base, but it is important to understand the differences of working with one versus the other. You know, you may or may not be willing to work a certain way or to deviate from your processes or give up some of that control. And that's okay. Just do what works for you. I have worked directly with mostly smaller nonprofits, a few large ones, and then some government agencies. But I've also worked indirectly with some very large corporations through small marketing or design agencies. Now, I like working through other agencies too, because they're doing all the project management and the communication and not dealing with the red tape, right? I'm not dealing with any of that. I'm just getting the work done. Now, I can't go put on my website the logos of those large corporations, right? But I know I did the work as a subcontractor, so there's that. Also, because of the nature of the work that I focus on, accessibility work, I find that both types of clients need it, but that I don't have to deal with some of the control issues. Now, something else to keep in mind is that you never want to rely on a couple of big clients. Now, I talked about the risks of having one or two big clients in another episode number 150. Be sure to check that out, the risks of having one big client, a gorilla client. And if you do accessibility work, also check out episode 171 on where to find clients needing accessibility services. If this was helpful to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If this content was helpful, you can support the podcast by buying me a coffee. It might actually end up being a glass of wine or some tea, but you could go to buymeacoffee.com/creativeboost.